If you want to be a millionaire, take 10 million, open a winery, and soon you will be a millionaire because there is a lot of overhead and a lot of costs that go into it. You're not going to see a return on your profit for at least 7 or 8 years.
Welcome back to the Building Nebraska podcast. It's a podcast for both dreamers and doers as we work to ignite your passion for entrepreneurship by showcasing those in the state who are out there doing just that, building businesses. And we're talking today with the owner of Nebraska's oldest and largest winery here in the Cornhusker State. That is Jim Ballard of James Arthur Wineries. Jim, thank you very much for having us out here.
You bet, it's a pleasure.
Take us back to the 1990s, and I think some of our audience will be amazed to know that there were not some 30-some wineries like there are today in Nebraska when you convinced your father-in-law, right, to put some grapes in the ground.
Yeah, we had the space here, we had the land. He was in the meatpacking business all of his life and sold his company and moved out here near Raymond. It was going to be a place for family and friends to come out. My mother-in-law loved animals, so we had llamas and horses and donkeys and all that good stuff. Well, I had a professor at the university, and I was going to some grad school. All my degrees are in journalism.
Okay.
Go figure. A guy making wine now, journalism degrees.
It's like your second home then,
yes,
with the microphone.
Yes, but I had a professor, and he always talked about the grapes he grew down near Plattsmouth in that area. And I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun to do someday. So went to my father-in-law and said, hey, I got this professor, and he grows grapes, la-di-da, la-di-da. Do you care if we plant a few in? I was just going to do it for fun, as a hobby, make some wine, try not to kill anybody with it. But he looked at me kind of funny, but said, sure, let's do that. And so in about 1994, we put in 100 vines, had no idea what we were doing. Read a lot of books, asked a lot of questions, had a great growing season that year. And so that next spring they came up and it was like, hey, we're experts at this, let's throw a few more 100 vines in the ground. And at the same time, there was a winery that was just getting started in Pierce, Nebraska, and unfortunately they're no longer in business, but Cut Hills Vineyard was up and running in Pierce, Nebraska. And we visited them, and we visited some wineries in Missouri, which has a great wine industry. Iowa was just getting started. Visited some wineries out in California where we had family, and one thing led to another. And one day, my father-in-law, who's James Arthur Jeffers, said, hey, if they can do it in Pierce and Iowa and Missouri, why not here in Raymond, Nebraska? So started getting some other crazy people who were interested in growing grapes with us as growers here in the area, and put in a lot more grapes and started putting the plans in motion for the winery. And here we are almost 28 years later.
You've grown quite a bit from those early days.
Yes,
How many
we have.
acres of grapes do you have here on the property?
Here on site, we've got about 20 acres of grapes. And then we have contracted growers or growers that we work with across the state of Nebraska. So we're probably working with close to 45, 50 acres of grapes when it's all said and done, which is a lot of my farm friends are like, yeah, 20 acres. And I was like, but, we don't get to sit in a tractor and put, we're out there touching those vines at least 7 or 8, 9 times throughout the year. And it's very labor intensive and a lot of hard work goes into it. So, yeah, we kind of jumped into this without a lot of knowledge. So it was learn as you go, which is great. I mean, we've learned a lot of great things. I'm learning every day. I mean, if I'm not learning something new every day, then I'm not doing my job, and I'm not trying to make us better. So,
from those acres of grapes, how many different varieties do you have growing here in eastern Nebraska?
You bet. We have about 7 different varieties here on site. I work with my growers. They have some varieties that we don't grow here. So when it's all said and done, we're probably working with about 11 different varieties of grapes. And they're all French-American hybrids, American varietals. They're grapes that are meant to be grown here in the Midwest, and that's one of our challenges. It's not as bad as it used to be when we first started, though. We're not growing Cabernets and Merlots and Chardonnays and things of that nature. We're growing like Edelweiss and St. Croix and Vignoles. And so that was a challenge to educate people on the types of grapes we grow and the wines we make. And it was funny, when we first started, people usually had 2 questions. They'd come out and go, man, I didn't know you could grow grapes in Nebraska. And the other one was, why are you in Raymond, Nebraska? And so, like I said, this is a hobby that got a little out of control is what happened. And we can grow good grapes here in Nebraska. We just need to grow the grapes that are meant to be grown with our weather conditions. Everything we have planted out here will survive 20 to 30 degrees below zero. So they're meant to be grown here. It's not to say that we couldn't grow those vinifers, the grapes that you're familiar with, that people are familiar with, like those ones I mentioned, but they just probably wouldn't survive our winters. And so we decided early on to grow things that are meant to be grown here and do the very best we can to make the very best wines out of those.
Speaking of wine, how does a journalism student become a winemaker?
It's a steep learning curve, let me tell you that, because as you all probably know, one of the reasons I was a journalism major, I didn't have to take any math or science in college, and
hey, you and me both.
yeah, and if you know anybody knows a little bit about winemaking, there's a lot of chemistry involved, and there's a lot of science involved, and so, like I said, I'm learning every day, and a lot of it's just trial and error. I mean. Ask a lot of questions, go to some classes, and to me, I've always said that wine will make itself. Grapes will make themselves into wine. What we're doing is we're trying to grow the very best possible grapes we can. That makes my job a lot easier as a winemaker, to make the very best we can. Then as a winemaker, it's just paying attention to the details. And my philosophy is winemaking is about 50% art, about 50% science. And the science part of it is that, before we even harvest those grapes, we're checking Brix, we're checking pH, we're checking acids, we're looking at the integrity of the grape. Even during the winemaking process, a lot of that testing is going on. But at the same time, there's an art component, that the mixing, the matching, the blending, and creating something that we think people are going to enjoy is very important. So I think it's a nice blend of that. I know some other winemakers who focus so much on the numbers that sometimes they forget about that art part of it. And then some that don't worry about the numbers, you can get into a lot of trouble if you're not, paying attention to the science part of it. So, to me, it's something that it's fun to be a part of, because we are involved in every step of the process, from the time we put those grapes in the ground, to the pruning, to harvesting, to the winemaking, to the bottling, to the time it goes out the door. We get to experience every part of that, and so that's very rewarding. And the other rewarding part is, being born and raised in Nebraska, it's great to create a Nebraska product that Nebraska is going to enjoy. And I know that if it is good, if it's a good product, Nebraskans will support it. We found that out very much so.
Clearly, that's been the case. You learned how to make wine as I look behind us at the various awards you received for your wine. But how many different types of wine are you making here?
Way too many right now. No, at any one time we could have about 20, 22 different wines. I don't know, that's what my whole goal is to find something that someone likes. So we make anything from mash dry reds that are barrel aged, all the way down to sweet dessert wines and everything in between. So part of that too is that it's fun to take one grape, and we may not be able to sell, for example, Edelweiss. We may not be able to sell all the Edelweiss that we make, but could blend that with something else, or create another wine out of that Edelweiss grape. It helps kind of create more opportunities to sell Edelweiss. And so, like I said, about 20, 22 wines on our tasting card at any one time.
We're sitting here in your tasting room, just with a Lincoln. Raymond is the address. Can you put it in buckets of where you distribute your wine to, and kind of how the percentages break down?
Sure.
In terms of how much you sell here versus in a retail outlet such as Hy-Vee?
Sure. Probably about 65-70% of everything we sell is on the wholesale market. We're about 300 different locations around the state of Nebraska, anywhere from Hy-Vees to the small mom and pop grocery stores, bottle shops, restaurants. I tell folks that you can't always rest on your laurels. You can't always be satisfied with where you're at, and that's real easy to do sometimes when things are going good, but you always got to be looking at opportunities. That's not to say you need to change completely in what you do, but you're always looking at opportunities and how you can grow your business. And for us personally here at James Arthur Vineyards, the other thing that we're looking at is succession. What happens? I'm kind of getting old here, so what do we do? So, we're starting to draw a family into it as well, and, how do you take care of them, but yet continue what we do out here? So those are all questions that small businesses take on daily, and in our industry here, it's almost, we're going to be 28 years old. The industry's getting close to 30 years old, and we're starting to see a lot of that in terms of winery owners looking to sell or looking to hand down to the next generation, and it's kind of a transition point now for the Nebraska wine industry, and we're part of that.
Well, what would a successful entrepreneur like yourself, Jim, offer a piece of advice for somebody interested in this space, not necessarily growing grapes, but just interested in entrepreneurship in general?
That's a good question. Thank you for saying that. Successful entrepreneur, sometimes I wonder about that every now and then, but I appreciate that. You know, I get a lot of people that come out, and especially early on, we had a lot of folks saying, you know, I want to grow grapes, or I want to start a winery. And the first thing I tell them is that if this was easy, everybody would be doing it. You have to have a good plan. You know, we have a business plan. We had a business plan to start with. That business plan is a living thing, so it's always changing, evolving, and you got to stick to those core values that you create in that business plan. But you got to have a good plan. It's not, you know, I want to open a winery. Let's build a building and open a winery. You have to have everything in order. There's a lot of different hoops to jump through, not just in the wine business, but in any business out there. And you got to make sure that that plan is taken into consideration. The other thing I let people know is that from a personal standpoint, you have to keep your priorities straight too. And you know, for us, we got, you know, it's easy to do when you're trying to build a business and you're in the middle of everything, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I just spent 20 hours at that place, or you know, I'm missing some things on the weekends with kids and family. I was very fortunate that my wife and I worked together for a number of years, and we just purchased about 11 years ago a space in the Haymarket. Now she's down there, but we worked here for a number of years together, and so it was hard to get away from that when we went home. I mean, it was just natural to talk about business. So, you know, we were about 4 or 5 years in the business, and I had to step back and say, you know, what are our priorities personally? You know, it was faith, family, then business, and that's always a struggle. And a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize that you know, how that's going to tax their relationships, how it's going to tax their family time. And so you just have to make sure that you always keep that in perspective as well. So, and the other thing that I kind of mentioned earlier, and you know, people look at me and they say, yeah, that's not, you got to be a little bit of a risk taker. You got to say, okay, you know, it's going to cost me a little money to do this, but you got to spend money to make money. If I fail at this, what's going to happen? You can't worry about that. You got to just jump in. You got to take those risks, and you got to continue to realize that some things aren't going to work, and then you start over. And but hopefully, if everything works out and everything goes into the proper order, that you know, you can be a successful business. And for us personally, and I know this is going to sound cliche, but a lot of what we do, you know, the joke in our industry, and you know, you've been around grape growing and winemaking for a long time with your dad, and the joke in our industry, if you want to be a millionaire, take 10 million, open a winery, and soon you will be a millionaire, because there is a lot of overhead and a lot of costs that go into it. And you know, even with growing grapes, you're not going to see a return on your profit for at least 7 or 8 years. And you know, we don't do this. We live very nice and we do well, but we don't do this to become, it's not because of the money. It's more of a passion, and it's something that, for us, it's a lifestyle. And that we always have to keep in mind that, you know, what we do is something that we want Nebraskans to be proud of, and to say, you know, at James Arthur Vineyards, they make great Nebraska wine. That's more rewarding to me than somebody saying, you know, they make a lot of money. And you know, for me, it's like somebody comes in and they enjoy one of our wines and they take a case home. That's awesome. So that's what we really strive to do, is create that great experience, and to make sure people are proud of what we've done.
I've heard a lot of compliments on your wine.
Well, thank you.
We enjoy it ourselves, so thanks for what you're doing. And you've been generous with your time today. Thanks for sitting down with us, sharing some of your insights over the years.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Jim Ballard, James Arthur Winery, our guest this week on the Building Nebraska podcast, proudly powered by the Angler Agribusiness Entrepreneurship Program, which is located at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We'll see you back here next time.